You probably know by now, a lot of command block engineers advocate for different revolutionary additions for commands in Minecraft. People like GamerGuppy want an official way to raycast so their huge command block machines can be condensed into something more viable.
So where and how is this motion applied? Well, that all happens in this huge module. It might look overly complex, but there's a lot of repetition going on.
People like Sliced Lime want a way to read and write data to scoreboards so their huge command block machines can be condensed into something more viable.
The problem is now we have three values. We have a predator chest red, green and blue, and we wanted to pretty much that lets us calculate a color value for the leather chest piece.
People like the Redstone Scientist want a way to use variables in any part of a command so their huge command block machines can be condensed into something more viable. And you know what? People like Onoware want a way to use entity data on the player so their huge command block machines can be condensed into something more viable. People have discussed these points extensively, but what I want to talk about is something what I think would revolutionize map making equally. People like me want status effects and enchantments to be used as attributes so their huge command block machines can be condensed into something more viable. And you know what? The implementation will be smoother and more polished for map makers as well. So what do I mean by this anyway? Well, currently you can modify attributes such as speed, luck, health, and attack damage for the player. This allows you to create items that can change those stats without needing command block clocks to give players status effects. I believe this should be the case not just for luck, unlock, resistance, health, food, speed, slowness, weakness, and strength effects, but for all status effects. This video will be an in-depth explanation on why I think this is so important, including many examples for each case. I touched on this recently with my small suggestions video, but I'd like to go in depth. My point is this: if status effects and enchantments were implemented as attributes, map makers could have more control, more possibilities, more creative freedom, and be able to implement new items in a polished manner without having to worry about low-end computers. That is the goal. That's why I believe this should be in the game. First and foremost, usage in loot tables. It's possible to hard-code a bunch of items with fake MBT tags into loot tables, but that comes with a few downsides. 1. The luck effect is difficult to take into account. 2. You need to use custom laws to display the attributes to the player. And 3. The randomization is much more limited due to only having a certain number of potion effects before everything becomes overpowered. This is especially true when trying to have multiple effects on an item.
You can see this time it has actually provided less armor because there's a lot of randomization that you can sort of add in the different functions inside loot tables. So there's a whole lot of room for randomization and collecting items and all this inside sort of adventure maps and stuff.
The next point I want to address is reliance on commands. If you wanted a helmet that gives the player jump boost, you need 3 commands. 1 to give the player a tag, if they have a certain helmet in their head slot, 1 to give the player the effect, and 1 to remove the tag again. At best, you now have 3 command blocks that run per second in order to make this helmet possible, which at first doesn't seem so bad, but when you have 10 of these items, suddenly you need 30 commands running per second, unless you use a scoreboard, in which case it's more like 21 commands running per second. This is even more significant if you want the item to work on mobs, and even furthermore if you have a server with lots of players on at once. The point is, the amount of possible items you can have now is limited by the strength of your computer or your server, which means every time you add one of these special items, you are risking your map or module to become unplayable for more and more low-end players. So if you're sitting there thinking, gee, 30 items, that's quite a lot, and I think 30 command blocks isn't really very significant in terms of lag. Well, welcome to the channel, new subscribers. Welcome everyone. Okay, so this is my Spirit Gems module. It can give you up to 20 random effects. Now, 10 of those effects rely on status effects, which can only be given via commands. If we were to turn all those status effects into attributes, something of this size can be converted into something on this side. And yes, I am limiting myself to 20 because if I add any more, I risk the chances of it becoming laggy for low-end PCs.
So what was killing you? What was destroying you the worst?
The lag.
The lag.
One fatal flaw. And I bet you've already guessed what it is. Let's punch this cow. Yep, can you see that? Just this module has created that. Which means that this whole thing really needs to be rewritten. The one that doesn't lag is on a very, very slow clock, and only sometimes does it activate its repeat command blocks that I am having, because I'm going to systematically rewrite each module, because last time there were some massive issues with lag. It couldn't run on my laptop, for example, and yeah, it was very, very buggy.
Okay, so let's say you're still not convinced and are satisfied with the way status effects work. I want to introduce you to my next point, and that is functionality. Items with attributes are responsive and instant. If you let go of the item, you will instantly lose the effect. If you hold on to the item, you will instantly gain the effect. Status effects in Minecraft have a minimum limit of 1 second. You can't give yourself a status effect for half a second. So when you take off your jump boost boots that are powered by commands, you still have that jump boost effect for an additional second. And unless you have a 20 Hz clock, if you put those boots on again, you will need to wait for up to a second before the effects take place. Okay, so why not use a 20 Hz clock? Well, remember how I said one custom item equals 3 commands per second? A 20 Hz clock would make that 60 commands per second, which is less than ideal. And to people who say that I could simply use the effect clear command to instantly remove the effect, that doesn't solve my next problem, and that is status effects overriding existing status effects. See, currently, if you're fighting a witch and she splashes you with a slowness potion, an item that gives you the slowness attribute will add on to the slowness effect rather than remove it. This is not the case for status effects in general. Allow me to demonstrate. I'll get my jump boost boots again as an example. My jump boost boots are giving me the jump boost status effect constantly. If I were to splash myself with a potion of leaping, it has absolutely zero effect on me. Rather than enhancing the power of potions, these new custom items have made potions completely obsolete. Let's compare that to my speed boost boots, which are powered by an attribute. See, I still have the option to use a potion of swiftness to make myself even faster. The implementation is far more elegant this way and functionally makes more sense in a way that doesn't make other mob attacks or potions obsolete. Okay, so what about enchantments? Why do they need to be attributes? If you want Bane of Arthropods on your sword, why not just put it there? Well, you could do that, but it won't be nearly as powerful as attributes. And here is my reasoning. Firstly, what if I wanted Bane of Arthropods on my helmet? So when I wear the helmet, it lets me deal more damage to arthropods. Not possible with the current system. The helmet gives me the Bane of Arthropods effect when I'm holding it, rather than wearing it, which doesn't make sense. Additionally, enchanted items cannot be enchanted by the player again without the aid of an anvil. So, if you manage to get your Bane of Arthropods sword, you won't be able to enchant it using a normal enchanting table. Why isn't this ideal for map makers? In case you want to make the item enchantable under regular circumstances. If I wanted to remove that ability, I would just use the enchantment rather than the attribute. But what really gets me about both status effects and enchantments, what they lack the most is the ability to be fine-tuned. You can't add exactly 10% jump boost. You cannot subtract exactly 5% mining speed. You can't specify that you want your sword to deal an additional 2 points of damage to spiders and an additional 3 points of damage to undead. You can't make it so your helmet increases your fire resistance by exactly 15%. No, not without extensive research and testing, and sometimes you can't even get the exact value you want. It's details like this which make balancing and implementation a tedious task for map makers. Those are my main arguments, but now I'm going to tell you exactly what I would personally do if this were implemented. So I am aware the haste and mining fatigue status effects can be substituted with the attack speed attribute already. That's great, but what about mining speed? Well, we have efficiency for that, right? Not so fast. As I discussed earlier, enchantments are not always ideal for map makers. And what if I wanted to slow down the speed of a diamond pickaxe? Mining fatigue? Not so fast. As I discussed earlier, status effects are not always ideal for map makers. So that's out of the way, what are the kinds of things I'd make with a mining speed attribute? Maybe a pickaxe, which is very slow but has high fortune. Perhaps a pair of boots, which increases your speed by 10% but decreases your mining speed by 15%. Again, I'm aware that these items are theoretically possible, but the exact values, loot randomizations, presentation, lag, and implementation would be improved if they were simply attributes rather than me fiddling around with haste, mining fatigue, and the fortune enchantment, and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I could talk for hours about the kinds of things that I would create if such an addition were made. But for now, I would just like you to enjoy this short little montage of the things I'd be able to make with all these things. So now that you've seen all my points, I'd like to restate what I said at the beginning of the video. If status effects and enchantments were implemented as attributes, map makers could have more control, more possibilities, more creative freedom, and be able to implement new items in a more polished manner without having to worry about low-end computers. That is the goal, and that is why I believe this should be in the game. So I decided to contact Sparks about this idea. If you don't know who Sparks is, you gotta check him out. He is the founder of Game Mode 4. It's a lot similar to the Tempest box. In fact, the Tempest box is inspired by Game Mode 4. The only difference is really that Game Mode 4's editions are more mature and they're compatible with Realms as well. Now, I admit, I approached him and I asked the wrong question here, but the response is still pretty interesting. I asked him if he had to remove certain features in a map because they caused too much lag. Now, that was a very tailored question, but he says, yes, though that wasn't usually caused by handing out potion effects. He says that in Game Mode 4, the problem is you can't affect the player in a survival setting, and it's hard to put armor to affect them without the armor keeping the attribute when they put it in a chest. He also said it's useful, but not the most pressing addition, and I have to say, I agree. I do believe that Slice Slime's idea of reading and writing is more important, and I do say that Gamer Guppy's ray casting ideas are far more important. But I don't want to downplay this suggestion. I want to bring it to light so everyone can see just the importance of it, even if it isn't the most pressing addition. So anyway, if this feature doesn't get implemented, then we can at least say that it was fun to discuss. And if you like these sorts of videos, I highly suggest you check out Panda, who does a Bugs and Ideas series on his channel. And he is a lot more knowledgeable about Minecraft's source code than I am, and he talks about a lot of the bugs regarding redstone, so I highly suggest you check that series out. Anyways guys, thanks everyone for watching. I will see you in the next one. Take care.